Morning, everyone. This is the Ways and Means Committee meeting. This committee makes recommendations to the full Board of Commissioners last Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. Before we start the meeting, just two quick announcements. We have a meeting scheduled after this meeting for those of you commissioners that can stay for the budgeting of outcomes. It will be here on the second floor in another room. And for those that can't make it, if you could get with Dennis or Katie to pick up the CD, and you can view it on your own schedule. Second item is to remind you that we do have a closed session to discuss labor negotiations at the end of this meeting. So we will be most likely going into another room and then coming back and adjourning. So with that, and for those people that are here, if you have a cell phone, if you could please switch it on silent or vibrate, it would be much appreciated. So we will call this meeting to order. The first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. We can stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we can have a roll call. Attendance, please.
Commissioner Hooper?
Here.
Friend? Here. Stepka?
Here.
Richardson?
Here.
Thomas?
Yep.
Maxbauer? Here. Fleece?
Present.
Wheelock?
He's
Hedman?
excused.
He's excused? Hedman?
Here. Okay, we have quorum. Next item is our first public comment. Does any member of the public wish to speak at this time? For the viewing audience, if you could just get yourself introduced.
Morning, John Syke, Grand Traverse County Planning Director.
And Jean Dorenzi, Grand Traverse County Planning and Development Office. And I'm here today to give you great news and a wonderful opportunity that has been given to Grand Traverse County by Grand Traverse County was awarded an EPA $1 million revolving loan fund grant.
Wow.
This grant will help the Brownfield Authority achieve their goal of revitalizing and cleaning up brownfield sites, and of course the brownfield goal of improving the quality of life and the environment. I also want to thank the County Board and the Brownfield Authority publicly for encouraging and supporting staff for looking for and searching for these funding sources to improve on and build on the program. We will be looking and implementing the program throughout the year, and you'll be hearing more about the program. Congratulations, it's a great award and a wonderful opportunity.
Great, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the staff for all the work that they did, and I also want to point out that this $1 million grant, there weren't a lot of them given out around the country. I think it's a tribute to kind of the work that our Brownfield staff does and our Brownfield Authority does, but also what's important to remember is this $1 million is loaned out at low interest, but it stays with the county. And that's going to become another funding source that we have. And so the interest and, the principal comes back and gets reloaned and reloaned and reloaned for our community. So it's going to be with us for a long time. So really good job.
Can we include my garage in the brownfield?
Probably qualifies, I'm guessing.
I just wanted to mention that when the application was made last fall, that we were told that this is a very difficult grant to obtain and that we probably wouldn't get it the first time, that we would apply and learn from our application, but we got it on the first application. And I think that really says a lot about Jean and her efforts in terms of writing the grant. It's a very difficult process, and I think that was excellent that she did such a great job that we were able to get it on the first go-ahead.
Great.
Thank you.
All right.
I have a piece of public comment, if I can.
All right, okay, go ahead.
I don't want this to become old hat, for us. This is the fourth year in a row that Grand Traverse County has received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting from Government Finance Officers Association. This is a tribute to Dean Bott and his staff for all the fine work that they do. I don't know what percentage of governments get this, but it's very, very low. and it shows our excellence in financial reporting. It says it's a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting presented by the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada to government units and public employee retirement systems whose comprehensive annual reports achieve the highest standards in government accounting and financing reports. And so I wanted to congratulate the county board for your support of the department and congratulate Dean and his staff for doing an excellent job. And we'll hang this downstairs with the other three, and we want to remember not to become complacent about it. You know, it's quite an award, so thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Good job.
Good job. All right, any other member of the public wish to speak at this time? Yes, sir. Get yourself introduced if you could.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Richard Williams. I'm a resident of Grand Traverse County, and I've come here this morning to speak shortly about the senior center. I probably wouldn't be the most rounded person I am today without some of the activities that are going on there. A few years ago, I joined and became active with the 3-day-a-week tennis program they have there. And many of the people that play tennis, there are two groups. One at 8 o'clock and one that plays at 10. And I think they play tennis every day except for Thursday with the different groups that are there. And that's just one of the many, many programs that the Senior Center has. And through that activity, I got my wife involved, and she started playing tennis a few years ago after I'd been involved for a couple of years. And there are other programs inside. The other day I went there to try to park, and there are, I think, 43 parking places. I couldn't find a place to park because of the number of people that are active in the senior center who drive in every day for card games, mahjong, and it's for many seniors. It is that don't have a church family or may have relatives or children that live out of the area. This is their focal point several times a week, and for some with the lunch program, it's almost a daily thing, I've noticed. I'm 71 and still quite active and have a lot of things going on in the community, but for some people, this is their focal point. And I'm just here to say they have a great staff there, and they have a lot of great programs, and I understand there's some negotiations going on, and I don't know the details of it, that there may be some refunding, and I fully support anything that will help the senior center. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming this morning. Any other member of the public wish to speak at this time?
Hello, I'm Evelyn Lambert, and I go to the senior center every day to exercise. They have some wonderful exercise programs going on down there, and it has really helped me a lot within the last 4 years. And I've been going to the senior center for about 10 years, I think. And I hope you guys will support us in everything we do. Thank you.
Thank you for coming this morning. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, we will, Commissioner Thomas?
I thought I might as well bring this up under public comment. I'd like to get your approval of sending a letter up to Abbott County for the commission and the family of Mr. Foltz, who died the other day in a truck accident. So I guess all we got to do is just rattle your heads, and I'll take care of it.
Is that fine?
Should we send flowers for the flower fund? Or?
If you want to.
I would think
I mean, it's our money.
Yeah, I support it.
Is that fine? $50, whatever?
Fine.
Right.
We'll do both.
Okay, good. All right, before we move on to approval of agenda, we have a request from Commissioner Fleece to amend the agenda. Commissioner Fleece.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend the agenda this morning to include a possible resolution by this board in support of Mayfield Township and the rejection of the Weber 4.8 injection well.
Okay, so it would take a two-thirds vote of all nine, comprising of 9 commissioners to amend the agenda based on our board rules. So you would be making a motion to amend the agenda, approve the agenda with the amendment.
Pardon?
Your motion would be to approve the agenda
Right.
with the amendment.
Right.
Okay, is there support?
I'll support.
I have a question.
All right, support by Commissioner Richardson. Commissioner Friend?
Do we have any information in front of us regarding that agenda item?
Yes.
We've been talking about it, it's been in the news. Tonight is the EPA hearing on that, public hearing on that. It starts 6 p.m. At Hannah St. Mary's Gymnasium. It was moved from Williamsburg because of the public outcry. And 6 to 7 is general information. 7 to 8:30 p.m. is the public hearing, and I'm sure it'll be a well-attended meeting. And what their proposal is to inject leachate into this well. It's a Class 2 well presently, which is allowed to accept brine. They want to make it a Class 1, which they could put leachate and other items in there. And that particular it would be at a depth of 1,700 to 2,200 feet. That well happens to sit directly south of 113 or Miller Road intersection on M37, about a quarter-mile south on the west side of the road. It happens to be directly in line with the Blair Township new well field they're developing on top of Hilltop, where the big towers are on M37. They're proposing, I believe it's a 1 million-gallon tank, in-ground tank, with 3 to 4 wells. They've already drilled 1 well there. And I realize the depth of the injection well, but the water in that area all flows north. And I'm not in favor of injecting any leachate into any injection well anywhere in the state of Michigan when we have facilities such as our septic plant, which with little alteration could accept that.
And I appreciate all that, and I didn't mean to necessarily get into the discussion, but I just wondered if we had anything for us and a potential resolution in front of us to look at.
I do have a summary. If you decide to add this to the agenda, I have a summary of the project. I do not have a resolution for the board.
Okay.
All right. Any other discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Okay, we will put that under,
Probably new business, Mr. Chairman.
new business.
Pass this out, take one. You already have one.
All right, moving on to the consent calendar. Before we read the consent calendar, has everyone had a time to review the closed minutes from March 17th? Let's just take a few minutes before we do that and have everyone read the minutes. Everybody read the minutes? Okay, Commissioner Thomas, we're ready to go with the consent calendar. Okay, hang on, she's got to read the consent calendar first. All right, go ahead and read the consent calendar.
The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, receive and file or approval, is approved by a single committee action adopting the consent calendar. Receive and file. Number 1, Consumer Price Index Information Inspections Fund Revenues. Number 2, Child Care Fund Update. Approve. Number 1, Ways and Means Committee Minutes of March 17, 2010. Number 2, closed session minutes of March 17th, 2010. Number 3, Internet Service RFP. Number 4, General Fund March 2010 Trial Balance and General Fund Revenue and Expenditure Summaries. Number 5, Appropriation Requests.
Okay, you have read the consent calendar. Does any member of the public wish to remove an item? Hearing none, does any board member wish to remove an item? Commissioner Richardson.
I'd like to remove item B4.
B4. Okay. All right, we will put that under second new business. Any other item to be removed? All right, hearing none, roll call vote to approve the consent calendar with the amendment of item number 4.
You want a motion
On
first?
B4. I'm sorry.
You got
We
a
didn't.
Well, no.
Yeah.
I give a motion a long time ago.
I'm sorry. Motion, we need a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended.
So moved as amended.
All right, moved by Commissioner Richardson, supported by Commissioner Friend. Okay, now we have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Friend?
Yes.
Stepka?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yep.
Max Bauer?
Yes.
Lees?
Yes.
Hooper?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, where did we put that item?
Does everybody want to put that under new business
It says,
or old business?
it says number 7.
Why don't we put it under E-Finance?
Well,
That's probably a good idea.
All right, let's put it under E-Finance, on item number 3. 3, yeah. All right, moving on to item number 7, department action items. First one is equalization. We have the Cherryland Electric MTTA appeal. Lori, did you want to address the board? Okay. Get yourself introduced.
While Lori's coming up, I just want to make everyone aware there is coffee in the back for the public too. Help yourself. It's right around the corner here.
Lori Spencer, Equalization Director for Grand Traverse County. I have a letter, you actually have a letter that's attached from the townships of Blair, East Bay, and Garfield. Those are the 3 townships that are still left from the 23 townships we originally started with in the Cherryland Electric appeal. They're the largest 3 entities. This particular case, I'm coming back to the board to ask for some support for this case from the county board. This particular case is a point of law that we feel is very important. We had a recent Michigan Supreme Court decision that overturned a case that the Michigan Tax Tribunal had been relying on previously. We believe at this point in time we have the support of the Michigan Townships Association. They're filing an amicus brief. I believe with the amount of value and contention with the county having probably the largest percentage at stake in this particular appeal, 17.3% of the tax bill is actually revenue for the county. And at this point, the townships have spent a tremendous amount of time and money already on this case. They only receive 1.68% of the tax bill. So my request is that the county board and the township's request assist a little bit in this particular appeal.
Do you have a recommendation, if the total cost to prepare the oral arguments in the briefs is $5,500, do you have a recommendation of what our share would be?
I would recommend half.
Okay.
What's the dollar value?
$5,500 total.
Dennis,
So the dollar would be $2,750.
Do you have a recommendation? Lori has a recommendation that we would potentially go up to half of the $5,500 for the briefs and the appeal. What would be your recommendation?
Well, let me update you on where we're at. We had the meeting with Garfield Township talking about bringing all the parties together, and the supervisor of Garfield, Mr. Korn, had indicated he wanted to talk it over with some of the larger townships to see their feelings on this. He's not responded back to me. I haven't heard back yet, so I'm assuming he's still working on that. So we have not come up with any kind of a formula. or any kind of a plan for how we might handle these kinds of things. And so my concern would be in terms of setting a precedent on this, although this sounds like it's pretty immediate, it's a pretty immediate need. $5,000 is not a whole lot of money one way or another in the scheme of things. So I hadn't really, I guess I don't really have a recommendation in this regard. I mean, I think if you decide you want to do it, it's fine to do it. It also seems like for 4 or 5 townships, $5,000 is not a great deal of money to spend to do this work on their own until we have a policy in place. So I hadn't really, I guess I don't really know the best way to handle this since this is short of having a policy.
Commissioner Friend.
So if I'm listening to you correctly, what I'm hearing is that given the small amount of money that it is, and that would be reasonable for 3 townships, that you may be concerned about the precedent we'd be setting.
I guess if I had to lean one way, and I apologize that I don't have anything more definitive, I would say we paid the filing fee, and, I think we should just respectfully, let them handle this one, and say we're glad to work on a collective basis to develop a policy on how we might share. I don't think in my discussions with Lori we had ever really talked about sharing the cost of the attorney, or we're going down that road. We talked about the idea of perhaps providing appraisal services, assessment services, when they need to hire experts and things like that. But we've never had a joint discussion with everybody on that issue. So I'm sorry I can't give you better advice. I respect Lori's position on it, and I understand where she's coming from, and it won't be a bad thing if you decide to fund half of it. It's just that I would feel more comfortable had we had a policy on how to handle this, kind of already established.
I know I was concerned about that when we forwarded the 1850, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Commissioner Richardson.
Lori, we're talking about tax years 99, 2000, and 2001.
This has been a long drawn-out case, and that's part of my point is the townships have contributed heavily to the defense of this particular case. And sort of what bothers me in this case is it's a legal precedence that is not only Cherryland, but it's any type of case. And what happened in this case is for 15 years, they paid the contribution and aid construction, and then the law changed. Normally, when a law changes, then you start and you go forward. What happened in this case, the law changed, and they went back and wanted to collect on what is behind and already gone past. And that's my point, is we're not just talking a Cherryland case here. We could talk any case where the law changes, and then we want to go back and collect that money. So we've had 20 units now pay for this, and we've had a Supreme Court decision overrule it. We've already had 23 units that have stipulated, or 20 units out of the 23 that have already stipulated. We have the 3 biggest that haven't yet.
Is there any possibility that if Cherryland were to prevail on this, that they can go back for more years than these 3?
No.
Or, no? Okay.
But they could go forward.
Yes, because we have new cases that have currently been filed.
So all the years past that,
Commissioner
2002.
You mean with other
With
businesses
new
or-
years that have been added.
Oh, new years that have been added?
Yeah.
Okay,
Those are recent.
Well, when did the law change? 2004? Is that what I read?
Correct.
So there's still 2, 3, and 4 that could be at risk or so to speak?
Or is it through this year?
No, those 3 years, that's when the law changed, and at that point, now they've tried to add some of those years, but at that point, they could have, at that point, not filed their contributions and aid in construction for whatever reason they still did, even though the law changed, and that's their point of contention on those particular ones, but that's a different case.
And I want to point out, my comments should be taken secondary to Lori's. She's the expert in this area. I'm not familiar with that, so I just wanted, I think it's important.
I believe that the money the county would spend on this, they'd get back much more than they ever spent.
But you understand the point. The money we'd spend, we'd get back, but the point is that we don't have a framework into which to decide what we're going to forward money for and what we're not.
But if you have 3 more units choose to stipulate, you will be paying out more than that.
Lori,
speak with Commissioner Friesen
isn't
and
this,
Commissioner Stepka.
do you know the particulars on this case? Isn't this the case where it was personal property?
Personal property, and it was contribution.
What they were doing was taxing the utilities, all the utilities, I believe, in the state of Michigan, from the road right-of-way onto private property, like to service a home or a business, and they were taxing them for the wire and the poles and all of the equipment the utility provided, which obviously shouldn't have been done.
That was agreed to by the cooperatives and the state at that particular time. Later, that law changed. And that's the point I'm trying to make, is that later, they ended up removing the contributions in aid and construction, but originally, that committee, including the cooperatives, agreed to that.
Yeah, but, well, they agreed to it because they were taxed for it.
They set up that agreement on how they were going to be taxed originally and paid that tax for 15 years.
Yeah, but then why would they
And then the
file an
law
appeal?
changed, and then they successfully had the law changed, and now we're going back to those years that they did pay for that particular contribution in aid and
So
construction.
they're saying, well, we were right from the beginning. The law didn't change till 10 years into this,
No,
so
I'm
we're going to go back and collect.
Right, and I'm familiar with this
Yeah.
case, and I think the taxing entities were wrong in their assumption, and Cherryland and the other utilities involved, obviously, went to Lansing, introduced and was successful in getting the legislation to correct an error. And just because an error was imposed upon them, I don't see where they shouldn't be able to collect what was collected illegally.
They agreed to that originally in a committee meeting. They being the cooperatives. Fully understood that they were paying that originally. It was later when they discovered that consumers and some of the other larger ones weren't paying it that they went back and had the law changed. In other words, we're punishing local units that the state gives the local units assessors multipliers to use on these personal property statements. The assessors in all of these local units use those multipliers that they were given from this committee to use. And now we're going back and we're billing back all of these units for things that the assessors did appropriately. We're bound to use those multipliers as given to us by the state of Michigan.
We got Commissioner Stepka and then Commissioner Richardson.
It just seems that though it would be best to have a policy on this, that time is of the essence, and for the minimal amount, basically, we're being asked to invest in this. If the opinion is it's a winnable case, it seems like a good investment for us to make at this time.
Commissioner Richardson.
I have two questions. The first question is, right now, the county is looking at a possible refund liability of about $12,000. Is that right?
I think it'd be a little bit more than that if you included the commission on
All right, it's around
Okay, well, I'm
14.
let's just say the county, because I'm just trying to get this straight in my mind. I understand that there's other units that also would be affected.
Right, yeah, it's approximately $12,000 just for the county if you don't include the
And this is a
Commission on
refund that
Aging.
we have not yet paid, but would be obligated if Cherryland prevails,
Or if the local units chose to stipulate.
or the local units choose, but which they haven't done so far, correct?
But those three have not, the other 20 have.
Okay. And then, my second question is still sort of the question I asked before, which is, in 2004, the law changed so that they stopped doing this practice of the, what's it called? Contribution aid of construction. So they were not taxed for that anymore. But are there other years besides the three that people say, oh, well, Cherryland won that case, so let's go back and file, for this, that, or the other thing?
Other cooperatives?
Well, or Cherryland deciding to look at other places where they've paid this tax and think, figure they can go back and get even more refunds.
We had the 23 units, the Cherryland obviously is in more than the 23 units. I don't know what happened in those particular units. I kept track of the 23 that we were involved with, but they did have other cases in other units.
Okay, but you don't think there'd be any new cases in Grand Traverse County?
Well, the new cases that have been filed, but that's all I'm aware of.
Okay, we have Commissioner Hooper
I
and
don't
then
have any-
Commissioner Friend. You all
I'm all
set?
set.
Commissioner Friend, and then we'll go to Dennis.
Oh, well, go ahead, Dennis. I was going to make a motion.
All right, Dennis, go ahead.
I didn't have anything.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I would make a
You're like,
motion.
oh, okay.
I'm thinking.
Go ahead,
I
Commissioner
would
Friend.
move that we accept Lori, our equalization director's recommendation, and that we contribute up to $2,750 to the legal cost of preparing the briefs on appeal and oral argument. And second, and along with that, that we direct staff, Lori and Dennis, to, over the next month, 2 months, to try to bring the parties together to get a framework or a policy together on how we would approach these in the future.
Support.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
And that funding would come from the Commissioner's Contingency Fund.
Right.
Talked with me.
Okay. All right. Any discussion on the motion?
Just one, I guess what you're meaning, that this is a special case here, but you're talking about setting up a policy for assisting in tax challenges all together.
Yeah, I pretty much agreed with what Mike said earlier.
Okay.
Okay. Further discussion? Hearing none, I'm sorry, Commissioner Flees?
I'm familiar with this case going quite a ways back, and I'll not support the case based on the history of it.
All right, we'll have a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Stepka?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes?
Yes.
Thomas? Max Bauer?
Yes.
Flees?
No.
Hooper?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes?
Inman?
Yes. All right, passes with one no. All right, thank you, Lori. Is that for your report?
Yep,
All right.
thank you.
Moving on to the treasurer's report, update delinquent taxes. Morning, Bill.
Bill Rokas, County Treasurer. I've got for you this morning is an update. We've completed the settlements with the local units for the 2009 taxes. The amount that we need to purchase for the real delinquent taxes is $10,144,480, which in the summary that I gave you, which you've had before, but it's been updated now to include these numbers. You can see that's the highest amount of delinquents that we've ever had in the county. However, we did see, this is less than I originally was thinking that we would have. I thought we could possibly have up to 11 million in delinquent taxes this year. So about half of the units actually collected more taxes this year than they did last year. And overall, our delinquency rate, if you can see, actually was reduced from 6.68% to 6.63%. So a small decline, which is the first that we've had a decline in the last 5 years. So even though we have the highest delinquent dollar amount that we've had over the years, it does look like we've maybe peaked out there. I would hope. Things can change, but at least it's a good direction that that our delinquency rate has come down. The other good news is that our prior year taxes, as you can see at the end of December, we only had 4.7 million in cash in that fund because we had a lot of our prior year delinquent taxes that had not been paid. A lot of those came in March, so what I'm short on the amount to pay all the taxing units off is an amount that can be covered by just delaying the general fund payment for about a month.
Oh.
So I'm not going to be borrowing. We passed those borrowing resolutions at the last, I think it was the last meeting, but we will not have to borrow to make these payments. Actually, all the payments have gone out except for the county's payment, which will be going out probably at the end of the month. So that, I think that's good news. It saves us a lot of interest costs and bond counsel costs that we don't have to incur. The other thing I was going to tell you is we ended up with 13 parcels is all that we ended up with that are being foreclosed on for the 2007 taxes. The big bulk in Acme Township, both those subdivisions ended up paying on the one on the very last day, but they did pay the 1 year. So that's where a lot of the cash came from to allow us not to have to borrow this year. They're still in the same position for next year, but looks like the trend there is that they're going to not let those go.
Yeah, they haven't given up, that's good.
Yeah.
Commissioner Richardson.
I do notice that the number of delinquent parcels dropped substantially.
Yeah,
Even
that was
though
also
the
a
amount
good,
went up.
yeah, that was also a good sign that, because that had been trending up as well, but, so, yeah, that's.
Can you explain on the very bottom, under 2008 and 2009, there's two amounts written in there for amount borrowed?
Yeah, it says borrowed, but it's, what those two amounts are, what the general fund delinquent real taxes are, and that's the amount that I withheld for a short period of time.
Oh, so basically, it's just a delay
It's a
going into the
delay
general fund?
of just the county operating tax being transferred from the delinquent tax to the general fund, so.
Okay.
And that, actually, it should be transferred quicker than it was last year, so.
All right, any other questions for Bill? Thanks, Bill. Appreciate the report.
Good news.
Yeah. Moving on to the senior center, who would like to take the lead on that discussion? We had an ad hoc committee comprised of Commissioner Richardson, Max Bauer, and Stepka. Commissioner Richardson.
Well, on the agenda is, will be a discussion of putting a millage on the ballot this fall to transfer senior center operations from the city of Traverse City to Grand Traverse County. And what has been going on for some time is negotiating what the terms of that transfer would look like. And that's the memo that's in your packet. And just briefly to go over the basic terms. And all of these terms are contingent on a millage being supported by the public to fund the senior center operations countywide. And basically, the county will pay the city rent for the use of the present senior center building on West Bay, so operations will continue there. The salary of the current director of the senior center, Lori Wells, will continue to be paid by the city, but the Commission on Aging will contract with the city for her services, and she will report to Georgia Durka on the Commission on Aging. There's one other current employee of the senior center under the city, the senior center program coordinator, and that person, I guess, has already submitted her papers to retire, so when she is replaced, she would be, that job would be replaced by the county and would become a Commission on Aging employee directly. And the city will continue to maintain the grounds and parking lot on the senior center property on West Bay. It's, I think, roughly 4 acres and is a city park, but they will continue, for instance, to mow the grass, plow the parking lot, and so forth. Oh, and by the way, going back to the senior center building, the city will continue to maintain, the physical structure of the building, so the county will not be under any obligation to deal with things like putting a new roof on, or heating and air conditioning, or whatever. So anyway, those are basically the terms, and Bob Cooney has been reviewing the millage language. I think he's close. Probably, if we make the motion we should make today would be, contingent upon his review of the language for the millage. But what the millage we're talking about is 0.1 mil, countywide, and then to support senior center operations, and then senior center operations will be extended countywide, including satellite and remote locations from the current senior center in Traverse City.
Okay.
So actually, I just for purposes of argument, I guess I'd be willing to make that motion.
Okay.
I'll support.
All right, we have a motion to approve the recommendation as presented in our packet.
This also approving the millage language?
And the
Or is that two different things?
Yeah, well,
ballot language
yes, to,
upon approval of Bob Cooney.
upon review of legal counsel.
All right, that was moved by Commissioner Richardson and was supported by Commissioner Max Bauer. Okay.
Can you restate that?
Pardon me?
Could he just restate that? Because I kind of went from the discussion right into the motion.
Okay.
Make sure I got the motion exactly as.
And do we don't have a motion written down?
Oh, you do?
Okay, okay, I would move that ballot language be put on the November 2010 general election ballot to support senior center operations at the rate of 0.1 mils per $1,000. And if this is approved, that senior center operations in Traverse City be transferred from Traverse City to the Grand Traverse County Commission on Aging, and senior center services extended throughout Grand Traverse County,
Based on the terms that we've got outlined.
based on the terms that have been
All
outlined.
right, and you were suggesting a November ballot?
Yes, I am.
All right, okay. Is there a second? Second by Max Bauer. Now we will have discussion.
And when we're through with our discussion, or whenever, obviously, we have both Lori Wells from the Senior Center and Georgia Durga from
Right,
Commission on Aging.
okay. Let's do commissioner comments, and then we'll go to George if you'd like to make any remarks. Commissioner Hooper, and then Commissioner Thomas.
Well, how long do you have to get this on to ballot? I mean, what's your deadline for filing?
August.
August? Oh, you have plenty of time then.
Well, let me point out that while there's plenty of time technically to get it filed, obviously the work to put together a committee to campaign for the millage, the more time they have, the greater their ability to get the word out. So that's important to consider as well.
Okay. Commissioner Thomas.
You said that this includes the services throughout the county.
Yes.
Is this other centers too?
The intention, and we obviously don't have all the details worked out, but the intention is that senior center programs which are now offered at the senior center would also be offered in places like Long Lake, Interlochen, Blair Township, Fife Lake, and Kingsley.
But some of them already have senior centers.
I think the idea would be to utilize those senior centers to offer the programs. In some cases, or in a number of the cases, the senior center programs have been run by volunteers. They've been intermittent. People, run them for a while, and then they get burned out, or maybe they're gone for a while, and then there's a discontinuation of the programs. And it's our idea that with staff being able to provide the programs, it'd be much more consistent.
I wouldn't want this to end up like the library is.
Well, that certainly would not be our intention, Dave, and I certainly agree with you.
Commissioner Fleece.
If the renewal millage for Commission on Aging were to fail in August, how does that impact us?
Well, I assume that this would already be on the ballot. Commission on Aging, I think, would have probably another year to try again for the millage before the millage expires.
That's true.
Obviously, nobody's planning on the renewal failing, but that's always a possibility.
Okay, and I'm concerned with, in your motion, you stated 0.1%.
It's 0.1 mil.
0.1 mil.
0.1 mil.
It's about $5
It's a tenth of a, yeah, but it's a tenth of a mil, correct?
Yes, a tenth of a mil.
Yeah, I think it'd be better stated for public purposes. You know, writing it's one thing, but conversing, if somebody
clarified.
misses the point, it becomes 1 mil. It's a tenth of a mil.
It's 10 cents per $1,000 of assessed valuation.
All right. So we got that clarified in the motion. All right. I have a couple questions, and we will move to Georgia. So I'm giving an assumption that the ad hoc committee comprised of Richardson, Maxbauer, and Stepka, did you take a look at a pro forma in terms of making sure that the ballot millage amount would cover all operations? I mean, was there a pro forma expense
Yes, we did.
thing that
There was
that backed
a-
up to the 10th thing?
Yeah, there was a pro forma budget prepared, and it's believed that the amount of money generated by this millage would, be, adequate to cover the costs of the operation.
All right. And second is, did we look at, I'm assuming since we're going to take the assumption is we're going to take over the operations of it, Dennis, do we have to build in the cost of, for example, insurance, liability insurance, and those kinds of things? I mean, do we need to get a hold of them, get an amount, make sure that's in the budget, or?
Well, Dean has reviewed the budget. I don't know that we put any overhead for our administration in the numbers that we estimated, but the city will be taking the insurance responsibility for buildings and things of that nature, and we'll be taking over the other insurance. But the short answer is, except for overhead, which Dean can address, I think Dean says we did cover that as well. So it has been all reviewed, and it's all included in there.
Was there a cushion built into the pro forma?
Yes,
Was there a little contingency available?
Yes, there is.
Okay, all right.
That changed recently when we were able to, with Commissioner Richardson's help, negotiate this change, because originally the city wanted the county to take responsibility for the building and responsibility for capital improvements and necessary maintenance issues at the building. And we were, with Commissioner Richardson and Max Bauer and Stepka's help, we were able to get them to agree to just do a rent, and then they take responsibility for all that. So that evened our cost over the 5-year period, and that changed the fund balance a little bit, but there's still a cushion in there.
And I haven't mentioned this, and I certainly should have, but the Senior Center Ad Hoc Committee, which was the 3 members from this county commission, as well as members from the Commission on Aging Board and 2 city commissioners, did review this this month and approve it.
Okay. And this is for a 6-year term?
Yes.
Is that correct? Six?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
All right. Any other discussion? Commissioner Friend?
Questions? What else is on the ballot again? In August is the Commission on Aging.
August is
November?
Commission on Aid, November is the Road Commission.
And this.
And this, as far as we know. I don't know what might be in local units or
Yeah, Road Commission's
other things.
November.
Okay. Just so you know, the Planning Commission looked a little bit at the Senior Center and the Commission on Aging, and although we didn't have a specific opinion on the merger, because that's not really within our discretion, we did take a look at, and I wish we had had this memo at the time, but we didn't, but talked about the Commission on Aid, the county basically renting the senior center, and the fact that the city would be responsible for the any capital needs, the interior and exterior maintenance of the building. And so we did feel that supported the policies and the facilities that we had. So we passed that motion yesterday. So what happens in the end of this millage if the renewal doesn't pass? Do the operations stay with the county at that time?
Well, if
Or does it revert back to the
looking
city?
that far down the road,
I just didn't know if we
I would
reverted
assume
it
that,
back,
I would
or-
assume that operations would cease, so there would have to be another way found to fund them.
If the Commission on Aging millage in August fails, operations, and we do have an opportunity to try again next year, but operations would cease.
So you're saying the same thing?
Yeah.
Similar with the,
I
okay.
think this was developed, I was given instructions to develop this on it being cost neutral to the county, and that's how it was developed. So there is no mechanism to support ongoing operations if this mill discontinues.
Commissioner Fleece. Oh, I'm sorry, you're not done yet. Go ahead, Commissioner Friend.
Have we seen, and I don't remember, Ross, have we seen the budget that you were talking about with Larry? Have we seen those numbers?
I have seen, unfortunately, I don't have a copy, I assume.
But I mean, that hasn't been before the Board of Commissioners in recent months or subcommittees?
No, it hasn't.
Okay. Boy, I think it'd be beneficial for the commission to get that information.
If this motion passes, we can certainly get that information for the board meeting.
Before the meeting
Okay,
next
before-
Wednesday.
okay. And the other thing was, I was noticing was in our planning commission packet, and it was actually, this was a report from Georgia. It talks about the original COFAC recommendation was for the Traverse City Senior Center to seek additional funding from adjacent governmental units, townships, for operation of the senior center. It was just a minority report, I guess, that took it a step further and suggested that it be transferred to the Commission on Aging. And, you know, my opinion is that first step that the COFAC recommended, where they seek just additional funding from adjacent municipalities, I think that that was the first step that should have happened, instead of just jumping to the, you know, second recommendation there.
Well, first of all, I was co-author of the minority report that you mentioned, but the original report, the original COFAC recommendation was to sell the senior center property and use that money to build a new senior center somewhere else in the county. But I mean, I'm not sure we really need to get into the philosophical discussion about that.
But that's separate than the operating money.
In terms of the operation money, the trouble with that model, and that's the model that's being used right now, is that the city of Traverse City is a primary funder of the senior center, and then senior center staff is, goes out to the other governmental units and, basically requests grants. Blair Township, for instance, just quite recently decided that they couldn't afford to continue their grant, even though it was quite small. And this is a way to put the senior center on a firm financial foundation, and the cost shared countywide by everybody who uses the services.
The senior center is a terrific facility. Support it. I've been at East Bay Township when I tried successfully to get it put back into their funding. I just think that had not been fully developed, and I don't think they, well, obviously they didn't do it successfully. I don't think they wholeheartedly tried to obtain that funding from some of those townships. But, I don't have a problem putting it on the ballot, but I will say that I think that this is shifting the cost from the city. It's shifting something, we've seen it time and time again. And I also think that...
Wait, you've seen what time and time again?
Trying to shift the cost from the city to someplace else, where they maybe haven't effectively gained those funds from the other municipalities. And, also I think that we're going to the taxpayers. We're going to the taxpayers again. And what about the money from the townships and the city? Will they lower their taxes accordingly? I just think it should have been taken care of with the municipalities and within those budgets, but...
All right. Set?
Yeah.
Commissioner Fleece.
One thing, I'm in full support of this endeavor, and I compliment the commissioners that worked on it. I think you did a good job. The only concerns I have would be for the outlying districts that perhaps are renting a building or have a program in place, that we be able to, assist them and run it in conjunction with the one here in the city. And, $5 a year is really a cheap price. for this endeavor. If we had time to look at it, and perhaps it had to be 0.2 of a mil, $10 a year, the present Commission on Aging has a lot of support out there. Everywhere I go in my district, all the seniors I know, they really like the program. And they're going to support that bugger, and I think they'll support this. But what we need to do is make sure that we're covering the bases, because to jump in your car and drive from Fife Lake to the Senior Citizen Center, that's pretty expensive, particularly for somebody on a fixed income. Same way even if you're in Paradise, Mayfield, Union. So I think we need to look into that. But I'm in full support of this program, and I think it's the proper thing to do. And I think it'll continue to grow if it's run like the present program we have.
It is the intention of, absolutely the intention to, offer these programs at a more convenient location for, the citizens who don't live right in Traverse City. Part of my district is in Garfield Township, and I found great support there for both Commission on Aging programs and for the senior center, even though they aren't that close. But I think the idea is, and if it needed to be that, some small amount of rent needed to be paid to, support a place to offer these programs in places like, Fife Lake and Kingsley and Interlochen, I think there would be enough money, in this millage to support that. The intention really is, if I could just address Beth's comments a minute about, doing a better job of soliciting money from the townships one by one. I think the idea is that the people running the senior center program should be concentrating on running those programs and not having to go out and, ask for money. And this would accomplish that.
And I agree 100% with you. And did I understand you right to say that Blair did not give their stipend?
That's correct.
That's correct. It was about, I think, around $2,800.
Was that for what year?
This year. This is...
Well, they haven't adopted their budget yet. Well, their fiscal year runs from, are you talking fiscal year 2008, 2009, or
Lori,
2009, 2010?
Could you come up?
Yeah, come on up.
Can I introduce myself?
Yeah.
Lori Wells, the Traverse City Senior Center Director.
For 2009, 2010, Blair did not contribute?
Right. They opted out this year. And that's part of the problem with the funding structure, because the townships
Right.
are on different fiscal years than us, and so we don't get any notice. So we've already given service to Blair Township residents, and they pulled out, so.
Was their amount still in the neighborhood of $1,900 for the year?
It was $2,800.
$2,800, okay.
Did you attend the Blair Township meeting?
No, I didn't know it was on their agenda.
I attend every one of their meetings, and perhaps I was absent. I don't recall missing a meeting, and so does Commissioner Thomas, and I don't remember that being on the agenda.
It was the same meeting that they funded fireworks for the veterans. I know that those are the two things up there together. And I believe Eugene Bond, on Aging.
Yeah, I was there when they funded that, and I don't recall, because...
We got a letter from them that told us they opted
Was that the
out.
consent calendar?
See, it's kind of part of my point. I mean, I remember at the township, we used to have the Conservation District come and show us what they did for the year. We didn't with the senior center. It was just very easy for those township boards to say, no, we weren't going to fund that, because we didn't have any interaction with them, any report for them on an annual basis, any presentation to show us how the money was being spent.
Well, one of the first years I was on Blair's board, that came in front of the board, and I questioned it. And we postponed it a month, and we had Lori come out, and her counterpart there, and they did an excellent job with the presentation. Plus, in that ensuing month, I got beat about the head by our seniors in Blair, so it really convinced me and taught me a lesson. Plus, what she was providing, or they were providing at the time for the dollar, was really cheap.
I know, when we didn't provide it at East Bay Township, and I remember I didn't have a sense that the board, or at least the majority of the board, was going to pass it. And, you know, it's not that expensive, and I just basically went through our budget and picked it out line by line. Here's $100 we can take from here, here's $500 we can take from here, and I came up to the, what is it, $9,000 or something like that, and said, let's pass it, and got support for that. Because I don't think it's that hard, but I just don't think that it has been presented well, it has been, you know, followed up well, and
Well, in my defense, if I might add, I always offer that service and am told, if we need you, we'll let you know. So I've always offered that every year when I send my letter. I do send an annual report, letting them know, you know, what we did this year, what we're doing, asking for the money, and always extend my services to attend a meeting. And, you know, most of the time I don't get called in, so I don't. I mean, we have 2 people in our senior center to run the program, so I have to put my time and put out the fires that I need to put out, and I do that, but to attend 23 township meetings asking for money would be almost a full-time job.
I agree with Ross 100%. It shouldn't be their job out looking for funds, you know, they got programs to run. And I think, I'm in favor of this motion, and like I said, I'd just like to look into it a little bit, or somebody to look into it a little bit more in case we needed 0.2 mil instead of 1. To run a good program, because $10 a year is, you know, really reasonable for what the Senior Citizen Center does now and Commission on Aging, and if they're combined, I can see some wonderful things occurring.
Thank you.
All right, Dennis, and then we're going to go to Georgia and Lori. Do you have any remarks?
Just a couple of general comments to make. One of the things that I'd like to kind of stress, I understand the Commission on Aging has about $45,000 this year put into programs for the outlying areas, Georgia? All right, some amount of money. Well, come up, please. There is an amount of money put in there to expand programs, and this is to lay the groundwork.
This is money to the senior center from the Commission on Aging.
Yes.
That's $32,000. That's the money you're talking about, $32,000.
That's just for the
For the
Traverse
grant.
City Senior Center.
No,
We
for the
also
outlying,
give
though.
funding.
They're just talking about the grant that we have to do the countywide network.
Yeah, my point is this, we have invested Commission on Aging millage dollars to expand the programs and to build this foundation of a countywide system to kind of lay the groundwork for this request countywide. And I think it's important that get out there and be initiated and implemented as soon as possible so that people out in the outlying areas can see this is the kind of thing we're going to get if we pass this millage. So just important to get that moving. The 2 points I wanted to make, kind of a structural points from an organizational standpoint. This organizational structure that was negotiated will be different. Lori will remain a city employee and will work for Georgia, a county employee. So that's going to be a little bit unusual, but that was necessary because actually Lori's pay is higher than Georgia's, and so we're going to pay what we would have paid had Lori been a county employee to the city, and the city's going to make up the difference. That's how this is going to be done. But Lori will report to Georgia, and Georgia will be the supervisor. And of course, one of the things that Ben Bifus and I agreed about is, and I hope you will agree, is that we'd like to get the contract between the county, Commission on Aging, and the city developed prior to the millage, so that agreement is all in place. This is how this is all going to work, so that if it does pass, we've got our structure all ready to go, and everything is laid out very clearly. So if you decide to go with this, I would ask your blessing for us to go ahead and move forward with starting to negotiate the terms of a contract like that.
All right.
There'll be a second motion amendment.
All right, well, let's go to Georgia and Lori. Do you have anything to add to the motion on the floor?
I do.
Okay.
Georgia Durga, Commission on Aging Director. First, I wanted to talk about the outlying areas. We, in regard to Commissioner Thomas, we have supported the outlying senior centers for probably since I've been here, which is 1988. So we provide them with grants each year, the ones that apply. We've funded Williamsburg Acme, which is no longer in existence. We've funded Interlochen, but they have not applied the last several years. We've tried to get something going in Blair, but, we also have limited resources, but we thought that would be a good place to start something. We currently fund Long Lake Kingsley Area Retirees and Fife Lake Area Senior Center. And we're hoping with the grant that we're providing to the Traverse City Senior Center that they can assist those three that are working now with some leadership, some administrative support, which seems to be the one thing that they struggle with. They find a leader and the leader just gets used until they're sober and out, that they can't do it anymore, or they move, or something happens. So we want some stability for these senior centers through the core senior center that can provide support for the outlying centers. So our intention is not to completely focus on Traverse City, but for Traverse City to help any outlying areas that want to develop a senior center. And we had talked about Blair in the past. We've talked about getting Interlochen moving. I know they have had a small group of people meeting, but I think they could really use some support to, as far as keeping their meals and some programming. And then we'd also like to look at Williamsburg Acme again, as far as maybe getting something going out there again. So I think our intention is to support any areas that want to develop an actual functioning senior center through the Traverse City Senior Center and programming, because they already do that and they are experienced in that and they can provide that to the outlying areas. But the Commission on Aging, and I'm not a board member, but I feel pretty comfortable in saying that I feel that the Commission on Aging Board will continue to support the outlying centers through the grants that we currently give them, have given them, and will continue to give them in the future. So our intention is not to close them or change them, but to continue to support them and maybe help them grow or support their leadership so that one person is just not so used up. And in regard to Commissioner Inman, we did do a 5-year projection, budget projection. We did not have in there the rent because the whole process has kind of changed. We were going to lease the building for $1 and now we're going to run it from the city at a very affordable rate. So, but we did have quite a sizable fund balance. I mean, not a lot, but some fund balance. So that rent money can be taken from that fund balance. And we still have fund balance left. So I think even if some things come up, unless they're ridiculously expensive, we should, the millage will cover more than, I feel comfortable with that millage, that 1/10 of a mill will cover those operations of the senior center and maybe any small things that come up. And we projected out 5 years. Dean looked at the budget and was comfortable with it, so I feel good. We will get you a copy of that. I'll get that to, would I get that to Chris then for the county board meeting? I'll get you a copy of that. In regard to the 1/10 of a mill, I do think a 1/10 of a mill is sufficient. I think 2/10 would be too much. I think a 1/10 of a mill is more than sufficient, more than what they have now.
This present climate?
I
said in this present climate?
Right.
Yes.
Be greedy.
Yeah, and I don't think we need it, you know, I mean, if I thought that we needed it, I think we would have asked for it, but I don't think that we need it at this time. That's my personal feeling. And my last comment is that I'd like to ask that the terms of the contract be specific as far as the arrangements of the staff and the supervision, and that, I've already talked to Lori, but to make sure that the senior center isn't entering into any contracts right now as far as long-term contracts or I don't know what those might be, but anything that would then be transferred over to the county. So I'd like that to be looked at. Lori, there's one small one that she's involved in as far as cleaning the building, but other than that, she couldn't think of any. But I don't know if the city has any contracts, but I think that should be looked at before the county signs a contract with the city. And as far as indirect costs, as far as the administrative costs, we did budget for indirect costs, the same as we do with our department. So that's included in this current budget projection.
Okay. Lori, do you have anything to add?
I think we've pretty much covered it. I'm excited. I think the stars are finally lining up. This is something that Georgia and I, frankly, have been talking about for probably 15 years or better, merging our programs. We serve a very similar audience, and I think both of our programs will benefit from having the relationship with each other. So I'm excited that all of the boards are kind of getting on board and understanding the value, and I think it's a great opportunity for seniors. I'm excited for all the seniors in the county, really.
Okay. Commissioner Richardson, do you wish to amend your motion to include the agreement between the city and the county be prepared prior to the ballot language, prior to the election?
Yeah, that would be fine.
right, did the second-
I should have
Yes.
included that in the first place,
Yes.
honestly.
Okay. All right, we have a motion on the floor that's been amended to include that item. Dennis?
Just one more question. Georgia, you're comfortable with the other terms that we've negotiated?
I talked with, our Finance Committee actually brought that up yesterday, and they're going to be actually asking for a meeting with you about the salary issue. So that, they're going to send you a letter, actually, I think, or call you. I'm not sure that they are going to decide what they want to do. I didn't really want to be included in that. So, other than that, yes, I'm very happy about the rent situation. I think that's the best thing for both entities, city and county. And the supervision issue, I got that clarified at a committee meeting, so I'm comfortable with that. So on the salary issue, I still have some concerns, but my board assures me they'll work on that.
All right, any questions before we go vote? All right, we have a motion on the floor to approve the ballot language as presented upon the review of Bob Cooney and the operational status as presented in your packet, along with the amendment, excuse me, the amendment to include that we're to prepare an agreement before the election, and this would be the November election. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Max Bauer?
Yes.
Fleece?
Yes.
Hooper?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Stepka?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes. All right, passes 8-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on to Commission on Aging.
Hey there. That's where you were going.
I was thinking that was, they weren't going to need me
Yeah.
for that one.
So we have the home chore lawn maintenance equipment purchase, page 30. Georgia?
Yes, we, every year, we replace worn-out equipment that we use for our yard maintenance program and our snow removal program. And we have worked with different companies throughout Grand Traverse County, and we try to purchase from different companies throughout Grand Traverse County as much as we can. But we're also required by the purchasing policy to select the lowest bidder. And almost always that is Lark Lawn and Garden. And so we're requesting permission to purchase the equipments that are listed on page 30. And I would like to note that we have a conflict of interest with Commissioner Fleece and Lark Lawn and Garden. But we have found that in working with Lark, they not only sell us quality equipment, but they also repair it for us. In the past, we've had a difficult time. Sometimes we've been asked to take equipment to Big Rapids or sometimes out to Williamsburg, out by the casino. And not only is it costly for us in regards to gas, but it's also a time commitment to, someone has to do that and be away from doing what we want them to do, which is mowing or snow removal. So we found this, that purchasing the equipment that we've listed is what we feel is the best option for the Commission on Aging.
Okay, Commissioner Hooper.
Yeah, I would move that we follow staff recommendation and award the bids for the Snapper 48-inch and the Weed Whips 3, the Leaf Blowers 3, and the Push Tile Mowers to Lark Lawn and Garden.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Hooper, seconded by Commissioner Richardson. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, did you hear that? Okay. Discussion. Commissioner Friend.
Dennis, do we need a motion to accept the letter of disclosure from Commissioner Fleece?
No, your rules say that a letter has to be provided at least 7 days prior, so you just get the
Oh,
letter.
we don't need to
Next
accept
week
it.
you will at the board meeting,
Okay.
if you approve this.
Any other discussion? Let's have a roll call so Commissioner Fleece can abstain.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yep.
Max Bauer?
Yes.
Fleece?
Abstain?
Hooper?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Stepka?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes. All right, passes. Georgia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to finance, budget adjustments, page 35, Dean.
I would like to make a few comments about some of the budget adjustments, starting on page 36, down at the bottom, 402 GIS. These are the budget adjustments to recognize the Grand Traverse Band grant money for the aerial photo photography. And then the item right underneath it is for the 25% match was required. The other component of this work was the $25,000 from the automation fund. Which is not here. That's an internal budget adjustment that did not increase that fund's budget. So that one was not required to come for those means. The next budget amendment that is on page 37. This is for the vehicles that are purchased for the sheriff's office out of the CIP fund. That required additional fund balance to be budgeted to cover the vehicles that were authorized. On page 38.
I'm sorry, on page 37, could you briefly discuss the MSU extension reduction?
There was, I'm not sure which committee this went to, but the staffing plan was reduced by 1 FTE, and that was a grant-funded position. This budget amendment reduces the associated grant revenue that was in the 2010 budget, and also reduces the appropriate related staff.
Okay, Dennis, do we know which program that was?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I don't recall the program.
The revenue line item is family nutrition.
Oh, okay.
All right.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, you have more?
Yes. On page 38, item at the top, corrections. This is the health contract for the jail. The plan was to cover that in part with existing line items that were budgeted, primarily health-related. Moving to the contract, now we make a monthly payment. And then the other component of the adjustment to cover the cost were the nursing positions that were eliminated, that became part of the contract. And the note explains at this point in time, I'm 32,000, almost 33,000 shy of covering the full amount for the balance of 2010. I'm still trying to identify those funds. We had indicated that we thought we could cover that with the personnel funds that were budgeted. That was the initial plan, but I have not been able to identify those funds. I'll try to identify those funds and bring a final budget amendment to cover the contract for the full year back to Ways and Means next month.
I have a quick question for you on that. The contract that we approved, that's the amount that we approved it for then. Did that have a fluctuate? Did that have a range when we approved it, or was that amount?
There are some factors based on primarily the jail count, the population. So, at this point in time, the population is, I shouldn't speak of things that I don't know. So
There is a fluctuation in the cost depending on jail population, but also on medical expenses. And so those are two variables, both that could affect the cost of this as we go on through the year. And I think 6 months into the program, which should put us at about October, I'll ask Bob Hall to come back and maybe make a presentation to you on how this is working. Another interesting side note, which kind of surprised us all, his mic's on. Thought me. Another thing was none of our nurses decided to stay with the company. They all went on to other things, so they had to bring in new nurses to run the program. So, I'm sorry, Dean, go ahead and continue.
Have they had problem getting new nurses, or?
No, they've covered it.
Also on page 38 is the budget amendment for the baseball program. This is based on the Parks Director's estimate of what those fees and related costs would be, but I thought it was time to actually formally make that budget amendment. And those are the only ones that I thought I should explain.
Okay, any questions on the budget adjustments? Moved by Commissioner Thomas to approve the budget adjustments as presented. Is there support? Support. Support by Commissioner Stepka. Is there discussion? Hearing none. we have a roll call vote on this one? Yeah, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Max Bauer,
Yes.
Fleece,
Yes.
Hooper,
Yes.
Friend,
Yes.
Stepka,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Thomas, Inman.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Moving on to request for proposals for central service cost allocation plan. Is that Dennis or Dean?
It's me. We prepare annually a central services cost allocation plan. We have a consultant prepare the plan. It basically looks at our accounting records. It identifies departments that are determined or deemed to be central service functions. They compile those costs, and there are allocations that are made back to operating departments, primarily the courts, and other departments, so that we can recover under federal and state grants appropriate administrative and overhead costs. We have used Maximus to do this work for as long as I have been with the county. Their name has changed over the years, and as I indicate on my cover, they also do the 4D applications for both the friend of the court and the prosecuting attorney. The summary that I included on page 47 really doesn't provide much information at all, other than the cost. But when you go through their proposals, it's really hard to quantify much, because there's not a lot of quantitative information. It's qualitative in nature. But one of the things that I asked for when I put the RFP together was for some minimum experience and qualification requirements, because I did want a firm that had experience doing cost allocation plans for counties. There are some CPA firms that are getting into this work, but I'll be honest, I did not want to spend a lot of my time and my staff's time, and this affects other departments as well. I did not want a lot of county time devoted to bringing a new consultant up to speed. There were the 4 bids that were received. In my opinion, Raymond's bid was a nice proposal, but they really didn't explain how they were going to do the cost allocation, how they would come in, analyze our accounting records, and compile the costs. They had done a cost model for Wayne County, but had really no experience doing county cost allocation plans. Liskey has not done any cost allocation plan since 2006. I was a little concerned about that, so I called one of their principals and talked to him yesterday. They had simply got out of the work. I did not feel their proposal was responsive, because they also, in error, included in their quote the work for the 4D, the cooperative reimbursement contracts. But in discussing that with him yesterday, he indicated that they should not have included that. They also, as I mentioned, did not have any recent experience doing county cost allocation plans. MGT is a relatively new company to Michigan. They have been doing cost allocation plans throughout the United States for over 35 years. They've just entered or started a practice in Michigan, and they're actually taking quite a bit of business away from Maximus in terms of 4D, the friend of the court, and the prosecutor's work. And as I've indicated on page 47, they have a fairly reasonable price or cost, which is $2,050 less than we currently pay Maximus. However, based on the experience and qualifications that I was looking for, my recommendation would be that we award a 1-year contract or renew the current contract with Maximus. And the reason I'm making that recommendation is I've also talked to the friend of the court, who would like to rebid out both the cost allocation services, the central services cost allocation work, and the 4D reimbursement work, and we'd like to use one firm to do that.
And that would be Maximus, you're saying?
It wouldn't necessarily be Maximus. It very well could end up being MGT.
Oh, I see, but you're saying that's why you do a one-year contract?
Right, my reason for that recommendation is there's a timing issue here. The cost allocation plan is done on an annual basis. It's done in connection with our year. The 4D, the CRP work is done on the state's fiscal year, and we currently have language in the 4D contracts. We have 90-day language where we could get out from under those. But timing is somewhat of an issue here to have the cost allocation plan prepared for 2009.
Commissioner Richardson.
Is this basically an auditing function? I mean, I read the pack and I thought, I have no idea what this is.
It's not auditing per se, it's looking at your costs, identifying what departments such as finance, the treasurer, county administration, what part of the board, all of those costs that are legitimate costs that should be indirect costs that are billed back to functions that we support, the courts.
So every year I get a questionnaire. How much time do you spend on this? How much time do you spend on this? And all support service departments get that same questionnaire. And that allows them to allocate part of the overhead back against all these programs.
The indirect cost that comes back to the support groups is allocated to federal and state grants.
That's
correct.
Okay.
It also
isn't that an auditing a specialized auditing function? But
no, in the sense that they don't have to verify that the numbers are correct. I mean, in terms of, in an audit, you're certifying or attesting to the fact that it doesn't carry.
So it's more of an accumulation of data rather
Correct.
than actual
It's a
audit.
compilation of costs, various allocations. They look at floor plans, we allocate our facilities costs, our insurance. It's a pretty detailed analysis
Well,
of.
can I say that, speaking personally, that, as far as I'm concerned, we're at your mercy on this, and we'll certainly take your recommendation.
Well
on
said.
what- I mean, the small amount of money between even the top and the bottom bids, I mean, I would just say, make your recommendation, and we'll go with it.
Well, in my recommendation, and I did not have a chance to discuss this with Dennis, based on the friend of the court's willingness to bid out all of the services, I would recommend that we stay with Maximus for 1 year, and later this year rebid everything.
Moved by Commissioner Thomas, seconded by Commissioner Richardson to accept the recommendation by Dean Bott to go with Maximus for a 1-year contract. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes. For those that, I don't know if anybody's still holding on to your closed minutes, if you could circulate those back to Bonnie for us. Next item is an item that was pulled from the consent calendar from Commissioner Richardson, and it was item
Page 17.
Yeah, I just wanted to have a discussion on the, one thing I missed with the new structure is the discussion every month on the trial balances and so forth.
Well, and I think, to answer that, I think we should probably, well, I know we should not have this on the consent calendar, because there are things that we should discuss.
Yeah, if that's kind of consensus with everybody from now on, we'll just put it under the regular action as opposed to.
Well, it's sort of like where we're at.
I think that's a good idea. We just weren't sure what should go where, but we'll move it down from now on and we'll put it under the regular section.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dean.
So we need a motion to approve that item?
Well, I think he wants like to hear about it.
I just want to talk about it.
Oh, you want to talk about it too? Okay, go ahead.
But yeah, somebody can make a motion.
I'm going to make a motion.
All right, moved by Commissioner Friend. Support by Commissioner Stepka to approve the report as submitted for the General Fund March 2010 trial balance, General Fund revenues and expenditure summaries. Discussion. Dean.
Since we have it under discussion, I would like to make a few comments, primarily with the revenue by source information on page 19. The main concern I have right now, without talking about taxes, because I think we'll talk about taxes in much more detail next month, But our charges for services revenues are down 65, almost 67,000 compared to the prior year. And this is a concern. The jail work release fees and housing fees are down 20,000. Some of that is because of the lower jail population. I'll try to quantify that better next month. I don't expect this trend to reverse itself over the course of the next month or so. Court costs are down. That includes all courts, circuit, district, and even the probate and family courts. Probably the most notable item here, though, is in that category are the recording fees and real estate transfer taxes for the Register of Deeds. They're down 50,000 compared to a year ago. And, you know, that's a significant source of revenue for the general fund. So if those trends would continue, I haven't extrapolated or projected this out, but I think that is, in addition to our tax revenue, one of the areas that we need to watch. And some of the courts, primarily the district court, the staffing was reduced somewhat to help offset the reduced revenues. But it's going to be very important that we monitor our revenue situation closely throughout the year to make sure we don't have any major budget holes, especially with the tax situation.
And let me add to that Dean and I have already been talking, the tax issue is obviously huge. It's just like the interest issue was last year, only a little bigger. So Dean and I, in the next month, will be preparing a expenditure reduction plan or a plan of action to address that $775,000 shortfall, like we did with interest last year, and we'll present that to you in May.
All right. One last comment, too. The increase in other financing sources is simply due to the timing of when we build the indirect costs. Those were not billed until later in the year, in 2009. We had those completed in March in 2010, and those are some of the budget adjustments that you also approved earlier.
Discussion on the motion, Commissioner Richardson and Commissioner Friend.
I had a question on the expenditure side.
What page?
I'm sorry, it's page 20. Again, and you may have just answered the question, Dean, but the large increase in, no, actually, it's a decrease in the transfers out.
That's also a timing. The transfers out are primarily the budgeted appropriations to other funds, and it's a timing issue in terms of some of the transfers out that we had made in the first quarter of 2009 were not made until April. There's no budget issue in that area at all. It's primarily timing.
But what about the rather healthy increase in public safety expenditures?
Most of that is due to two things: being at full staff in most of the sheriff's office departments, corrections and patrol, but it's also due to the increases in wage and benefit packages.
Commissioner Friend.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to ask, Dean, would it be reasonable to ask you maybe to provide a short descriptive in your cover page of this when you submit it every month that shows, you know, which are the budget issues? Because some may be concerning to you and others are just timing issues, as you mentioned. Because, you know, I look at this and I'm like, okay, why is it 2.7 million higher? And like you said, that's just solely a timing issue. The $500,000 on the expenditures is a timing issue. And I just, to put those in context, you know, these are the things that, you know, that I'm concerned about, or, you know, other analysis.
Starting in April, you will see that.
How about me?
Oh, that's right, we're in there. Yes, next month you'll have that.
All right, that's a good comment. Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. All right, we will move on to administration. First item is the Fife Lake fireworks request, page 48.
You have a request here from Fife Lake for fireworks, and, you know, I'm sorry, we can check this for you. Dean and I were trying to remember, it's been several years since we did it, but we couldn't remember if it was a $500 or a $1,000 appropriation in the past.
I believe it was 1,000 last year.
1,000?
1,000, right, he's right.
If you decide to do this, a recommendation would be out of the commissioner contingency again.
Yeah, all right.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Thomas,
Support.
support by Commissioner Flees to allocate $1,000 to the Village of Fife Lake, which would be transferred to the Fife Lake Chamber of Commerce for their fireworks on the 4th of July. Is there discussion?
I just have a quick
Commissioner
question.
Friend and then Commissioner Max Bauer.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Commissioner Max
Dennis,
Bauer.
how much is in our contingency fund at the
You
moment?
started with about $75,000 this year, I
That's
believe.
about what's in it.
And these appropriations today, I think, are the first
right,
from
okay,
there.
thank
So
you.
you're probably about 72.
Commissioner Friend, do you have a question?
No, that's fine.
All right, any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, passes. All right, administrator update.
I'll try to be brief. First of all, let me say that the budgeting for outcome meeting will be right after this, as soon as Katie gets set up in this room. We've invited department heads to attend these too. There will be 2 other sessions if you can't make today. They will be held in the conference room in the back of this floor, you know, the back room. One will be Friday at 9 a.m., and the other one will be next Wednesday before the board meeting at 5 p.m. So those are 2 other options if you can't make this meeting today.
Which one has the pillows?
These chairs are more comfortable, Commissioner. Labor negotiations continue, and as you know, we'll be talking about that some more with Jen. We have 2 current contracts that are being negotiated now, but then we have 6 others, Jen, that we have wage reopeners that are coming in the fall.
6 full contracts, 2 wage reopeners.
I'm sorry, I had it backwards. 6 full contracts, 2 wage reopeners in the fall. So that's taken quite a bit of time, and Jen's been real involved in that. It's going well. The 3rd floor remodeling is now completed. I did want you to know that I had a meeting at the request of the first floor department heads, the treasurer, the register of deeds, the clerk, and the equalization director, asking to look at the space needs on the first floor, primarily regarding, I think, filing at this point in time. And so I just wanted you to know we're having initial meetings talking about what options there are, or how we might better utilize that space.
Like adding a bathroom on the first floor?
Well, you know, quite honestly, Commissioner, that is one of the things that, and I say this not having any idea of the cost, I'm guessing it's very expensive, but frankly, that's one of the complaints we regularly get, is that there's no public bathrooms on the first floor. And so when we talk about this, we will certainly be talking about that.
Good exercise there in the basement.
So anyway, I just wanted you to be aware, very initial discussions, but there is some discussion going on about that. I think I said, yes, sir.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
What kind of unallocated space do we have on the 3rd floor now that the remodeling is done?
There is none on the 3rd floor,
There is
other
not?
than the conference room. But of course, the basement has a lot of unallocated space. And so we're going to look at a couple of options and, maybe spend a couple $100 from those departments trying to, see space needs, figure out really what the needs are. And, if you think about it, there are a couple things on that floor. Well, I love the idea that we have all our offices there for the public to access. I think that's really good, and sharing it with the city, I think, is excellent. But if you think about it, there are 2 really glaring things that come out. The first one is what Commissioner Friend brought up, no bathrooms, and the second one is, think how you get to Lori's office. You almost have to kind of walk through 2 offices and a copy room to get to the equalization office. Because of the size, there's no entrance really to that, and that's always been a little bit of an issue. People have a hard time finding it. So we're just going to look at it and see what the options are, but I wanted you to be aware of the fact that we were having that discussion.
Maybe we could open a pub in the cafeteria.
Pub, yeah.
And
Probably do better.
Oh, my.
revenue producing, perhaps. The next thing is, I think I sent you all copies. I've sent Mr. Peterson a letter to remove the rest of his equipment from the dam. I've met with the attorneys, and they approved the letter. I think we gave him 60 days to get the rest of that equipment out. we sent it certified mail to both locations, Arizona and the Peninsula, to make sure he gets it.
Sorry to interrupt, but Norm Tutlis was on the radio yesterday pushing for a referendum on the dams.
Yeah, I haven't checked into that, but my
think it's
experience is
referendum.
I don't think we can legally do referendums, opinion referendums. I don't think you're allowed to.
No, you're not.
The public can ask for a referendum. They can petition for one.
That could be, I'm
But
not familiar with that.
a referendum is what a referendum is. We still can, we don't have to do what they say.
Right.
Well, I'd like to I believe I understand this, is that on a referendum, there has to be a financial, we would have had to pass some kind of financial burden onto the county in order for the voters to reverse that decision.
Well, there's enough unusual, there are enough unusual aspects to this that I think I'm going to go ahead and talk to Bob Cooney and get us a firm answer on the ability to do that and under what circumstances, and I'll get that for you.
Sounds like a good idea.
Because I think that issue will continue to come up.
Yep.
I think most of you know this, but I just wanted to make sure all the commissioners were aware. There was a discussion at the G5 meeting Monday morning about, and a proposal that I think they are going to forward to Sewer and Water this week and then to the Board of Public Works and maybe to Septic Finance, I'm not sure, for the townships are looking at the idea of not going forward with a special assessment, but instead looking at some mechanism for the county and the 5 townships to share any shortfalls in the budget for a period of, I think, 5 years. And there was discussion about appropriation, but I think what came out of that actually was some kind of a mechanism for the county to join with the townships and fund shortfalls at perhaps the rate of interest that we receive on our investments. And then when revenues start to come around, hopefully we would all be reimbursed as a result of that. So I just want you to be aware of that kind of change, or a little bit, or I guess formalization of that. And Commissioners, the meeting Thursday, is that septic or is that? Septic Finance. So it's going to be discussed at that meeting, and I wanted you to be aware that that's kind of a position that they formally took. They went around and asked, and I think one of the townships was not there, Elmwood, but the other ones, several of you commissioners were there, but the other ones all said, we're not interested in a special assessment, I believe.
Quick question. Oh,
If I could clarify, my understanding, I was not at the meeting, but my understanding was they were not interested in a special assessment for the 5 townships only, without including the rest of the county.
Definitely said that. I thought they went on to talk about special assessment generally. And
I think they just addressed the 5 townships.
is that what they did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Peninsula in particular is not interested in any.
Yeah.
Well, they actually passed a
Right, for sure.
resolution by the
Yeah.
township
Right.
board last December, I think.
Thank you for that
Yeah.
clarification. I was wrong on that.
sure.
Commissioner Friend.
They actually did talk about countywide special assessment district after they talked about the 5 townships.
I
They
thought.
talked about the countywide, and I had written down what they were saying, but I can't remember now, but it was more generally like, well, we don't think it's feasible, kind of a thing.
I don't think they took a consensus, or went around and asked everybody specifically, but
You know,
it was general.
when you were recapping kind of what they were recommending or forwarding on, you mentioned that when revenues come around, did they attach any plan to it on how revenues would come around or what resources they would put towards revenues coming around?
I think, no.
No.
I believe that their idea is that they want to focus on additional flows and that kind of thing, and, but no, they were not specific on that. And so I assume you'll talk about that at Septic Finance on Thursday. But I thought it was interesting that there was an actual motion to go in a direction from the G5. So that was something we haven't really kind of seen, other than the motion to allow or offer to us to own the plant.
Well,
That's the only other motion.
I did speak on their public comment once I heard it. I did react to it. I did indicate it was my personal opinion and not the viewpoints of the Board of Commissioners. But I just see that action as the path of least resistance. That would not affect any action on their part in terms of their boards, the 5 township boards. And I indicated to them that I felt, as I guess a career banker, that loaning additional money on top of a balance that cannot be paid for at the present time, and growing that balance to potentially over a 2-year period of $1.2 million, I felt was inappropriate, and that in my mind, any situation that they would come to the Board of Commissioners with would have to have, as Commissioner Friend said, a detailed business plan about how they were going to get to at a point where, what actions they were going to take and things that they were going to move forward on to get us to a point where the plant could pay for itself, and then we can begin to discuss, how we might want to approach the shortfall. So I think we got a long way to go on this thing. I'm not comfortable with the present recommendation that appears to be coming out of the G5 committee, personally. And I can only speak personally on it. So, I'm sure it'll get a lot more discussion and attention as we get through this process, so.
What's interesting about this is not only is there a lot of divergent opinions, but it seems like the ground's shifting underneath you with the people, you know what I mean? Opinions are changing as well. It's interesting.
A pretty dramatic shift.
Commissioner Maxbauer.
My opinion remains the same. And why would they move in any one direction? This county board continually bails them out, continually. There is not going to be an answer until we stop.
All right, we'll just move on to the county administrator's update.
Obama must have some money for that.
What?
What do you think? Obama must have some money for that.
His stash.
Dennis, you want to continue on with your administrator's update?
Yesterday I had a meeting with the committee to talk about my contract with the board. We made some really good progress, I think, and I've been asked to go back and redraft it and to get it to Bob Cooney. I expect that committee will bring a report to the board at the RMA meeting in May. Just wanted to let you know that. In terms of health care, Jen has attended one conference on the changes in the new health care reform law and how that's going to impact us. I've had one meeting where I've been kind of started to be brought up to speed on this. Let me say that the health care reform legislation is 2,800 pages long. And so people are just starting to kind of figure that out. But let me say that, just give one example, the fact that on September 23rd of this year, currently children up to the age of 24 or 26 that are under IRS guidelines that are still in college qualify for insurance with their parents. And of course, September 23rd, that requirement goes away, and anyone up to the age of 26 can be covered under their parents' policy. In talking to Priority Health, they estimate that the cost of that will be about 1% on premium, just for that change alone. And that's one of many changes. So the very, very initial look at our policy is that we're going to be expecting to see something in the area of a 1% to 4% increase as an employer based on the cost of that. There's also a $200 per contract tax that the insurance company has to pay on every contract that they have to the federal government to help fund the insurance for those who can't. So I just wanted you to be aware, we're anticipating there's going to be an actual significant financial impact as an employer as a result of that. And I wanted you to be aware of that. Pardon?
That's supposed to reduce cost.
Well, I think yes. The last thing I wanted to point out is that we continue to make progress on the new records management system. Those meetings are ongoing. The vendor has been here at least 3 times, meeting with departments and developing that plan. And those meetings are going very well. One little hitch that we've kind of run into here is that I think because of a communication problem in the city has notified us that there are a couple of the enhancements to the system that we are planning to implement that they will not be implementing, which is going to impact our cost. They've decided they don't want to do electronic ticketing now, and there was one other aspect of the project that they feel they aren't going to be doing. So we're working on trying to get that price reduced with the vendor. Of course, it's after we sign the contract. And And we're working on trying to determine what the long-term impact of that'll be, and so I just want you to be aware of that, and I hope to have an answer in the next couple of weeks.
Can can't the city be held, responsible or liable for not following through with that?
No, I don't think so. We have no contract with the city for these kinds of things. We've always worked cooperatively with them in these, and
But it was your understanding when you signed the contract that the city was participating?
It was ours.
All the way through.
And I'm not saying the city alone is to blame on this. They had participants in the meetings with us all the way along. They actually went on one of the trips with us. And when I sat down with the city manager to say, okay, we broke down the cost, Dean and I and Don sat down, I guess it's fair to say that his staff had not made him aware of what the impact was going to be. And even though we had offered some financing options to do it over a period of time, they decided that they would not be participating in that. And so they've kind of put us, on the spot a little bit here. We will work through that, though, and I'm confident we'll come up with a conclusion to it. But no, we've never had those kinds of relationship, but I can tell you in the future we'll be more careful about how we will make sure they understand the implications of it completely before we sign the contract. So I'm confident we're going to work through it, but I wanted you to be aware that it's a small sticking point that we're going to have to work through. Some of that, like, for example, the equipment on electronic ticketing, well, I'm assuming we're not going to get that equipment. We won't buy that extra equipment.
Right.
And so we won't spend that money. But some of the software development, that becomes more complicated.
Commissioner Friend.
You mentioned you didn't have a contract with them. Was there any motion at their board level to approve that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
That's what I was kind of asking for them to, kind of finalize that. They made a motion to give us the grant. They got a federal grant, I think it was $24,000, and they did approve that, and that will go towards the expenses of the software development and those kinds of things, but not for the complete package. And so we're gonna change our mechanisms of how we do that stuff to make sure that's all taken care of up front in the future. That's really what I had to report, unless you have any questions.
Do you have an update on the MERS situation? The board did pass a situation where we would implement a study or go through a actuarial, whatever.
We got some preliminary numbers from them. They were just like kind of their initial go at, but they're still in the actuarial review, and we have not received that yet, have we, Dean?
No.
So we don't have it.
That's ongoing, though.
It is.
Any other questions for the administrator?
I have a quick question for you.
Yes.
You, after the school board and the commission meeting the other day, you had some ideas given to you from staff and I guess other fellow elected officials, Linda in particular. Have you mentioned that to the rest of the commission and forwarding that on, or?
No, I haven't. We had a brief discussion with a couple of the commissioners afterwards, but Linda Coburn had mentioned, and I believe the school board is aware of this, because I talked to Megan Crandall afterwards from the school board. One simple thing that the schools could consider is changing their election year. Right now, they do their elections on the opposite year of the general elections for the county-wide elections, and so as a result of that, they have to pay the fees of a special election, and that's been estimated at about $33,000 a year for TCAPS, and I think about $5,000 a year for Kingsley, and so that would require changes, but if they could change and put their elections on the same year as our elections, they wouldn't have to pay that cost, and it's almost $40,000 a year that would be saved. So Commissioner Friend had suggested first that we send them a thank you letter, which I think is very appropriate, and perhaps that we could mention in that letter the fact that, keep this in mind, this is something that staff brought up, and if you weren't aware, we want you to be aware, here's some savings.
Don't they elect like one school board member every year?
I'm not sure, Commissioner, how those elections take
place.
Because
there are years, like in the presidential election in '08, I know there was somebody running.
Bonnie, do you know?
We have one every year.
So it's really a question of them consolidating, consolidating to the general elections, even your elections, to avoid that extra fee.
So they might have to have two people elected every other year as opposed to one every year, or something like that.
Actually, Linda sent me an email, and I haven't had a chance to completely read through it, but it was a bill, quick take on it, and I got to go back and read it, but was that there's a bill in the legislature that would actually make them go to a more streamlined election system. So if that passes, they would already be doing that and getting those savings automatically.
Well, I'm sure they're aware of it, but if they're not, I think it's important that we make them aware of that. So as long as the board is concurring, I'll put together a letter thanking them and for Dick's signature and mentioning this.
Anything else on the administrator's update? All right, moving on, unfinished business, we have none. Under new business, we have a added agenda item from Commissioner Fleece.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we provide a resolution from the board to the Mayfield, or to the EPA, supporting Mayfield Township's board's position on the Weber 4-8 well, which is, they reject it in its entirety. It's changing from
Support.
So, the motion is to have a resolution that would be addressing the EPA's approval process for the deep injection well, and that we would ask them to deny that application for
changing it from a Class 2 to a Class 1.
Okay.
In support of Mayfield Township, isn't that? I mean...
Well, why don't you just make it general?
Okay, yeah. We'll just make it general.
That we don't want the well.
Okay.
Because I don't know what Mayfield resolution said.
But the stickler, if you will, is that meeting is tonight, and I would like to give them the resolution tonight. I realize it should be technically voted on next week, but because I wasn't smart enough to bring it to you last month, it's an idea that came up and a former commissioner brought to my attention. She said, why don't you just get a resolution from the board? And I really hadn't thought about that.
All right, we need a motion.
You have?
Yeah, motion, you got to support.
I'm sorry, who made that? Well, you told Fleece to make the motion. I didn't hear the motion.
John would like to make
So would you, is that your motion?
Yeah.
And then you seconded it?
Yeah.
All right, I like how you volunteered in motions.
John.
All right.
See, John?
John, do you want to make a remark?
John Syke, County Planning Director. In terms of the EPA's public hearing process, they are having a meeting and a hearing tonight, but comments can be submitted up to May 5th. So they do not have to be in by tonight. It may be helpful to plead your case in front of them, but they are accepting comments all the way up to May 5th.
So if this passes, I think commissioners can go there tonight and say the county board passed a motion opposing this, and there will be a resolution adopted at the board next week, or will be presented to the board. And but I also wanted to point out that I talked to John about this some time ago, and I kind of thought this was originally an issue for the Plan Commission. You know, what is the county's position on deep injection wells? You know, do we want to take a position? And John has developed, this is separate but related. John has developed some language that would be a general position of the county on deep injection wells that we have talked about taking to Plan Commission.
Yes, they saw it actually yesterday.
We did yesterday, and I have what was passed.
Okay, good, and it was passed, and then we're going to take it to Board of Public Works to take a position on it?
Actually, what I thought we would do is that the Planning Commission would make its own statement based on its perspective. The Board of Public Works will be having it on its agenda on Monday, and we'll kind of take it from their perspective, and then the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority would be seeing it next Wednesday, and kind of, so really it's not so much that there's one statement that everybody approves, it's more or less a compilation of statements together, and then obviously the Board of Commissioners would have its own opportunity.
So are you suggesting that the Board of Commissioners then would see something Wednesday night, or would next week, or we'd wait a month and do this? I guess I'm asking the question, are you looking for this for May 5th? Or is this just a general thing that we would have then on deep injection wells in the future?
We could forward what the Planning Commission passed yesterday to this board for next week to have in time for May 5th.
Yeah, I think it'd be appropriate, we could get something for you for your next week's meeting and get it in time for the May 5th. And I think we could formulate it, what you probably won't see until that next Wednesday will be the brownfields action and maybe the BPW, but we could still have something in your packets and some information for you to consider for that next meeting.
Okay. Dick?
We're going to have a little show and tell. If you look at these maps that were circulated around, see where the well is. Now, if you go, now, that's not the scale, but within 2 miles in 3 directions, you have 3 different watersheds involved. Up near Euchre Road, Hamlin Road, up in that, that's about where the height of land is, about where it says Euchre Road, right where it says road. That's about as high as it gets. And it's higher than actually where the well is. But just right there is the Platte River watershed. Right straight south there is the Anderson Creek, which goes into the Manistee, and if you go to the east a mile or so, that creek there goes into the bay. So as far as I'm concerned, they couldn't have picked a worse spot to have this well. Sure, it's going to be down 1,800 to 2,200 feet, so that's roughly 1,000 feet lower than the level of the bay, but who knows what the water does down there, which direction it's going. So, you know, it could be coming up at quite a rate. You get over on Euchre Road there, and over there, they can't have septic tanks. They've got to have holding tanks right on top of the hill because of the ground and the high water pressure. A few years ago, they come in and drilled a well in the southeast corner of Duck Lake, and they had 1,000 gallon a minute flow. Which,
Commissioner Richards.
You know, where's the water coming from? You don't know.
I mean, I think this is probably a good idea, but I don't know anything about it at this point, and if we could just wait until next week, since the comment period is open to May 5th, I have a lot of questions, and I don't have much information at this point. What are the possibilities, Dennis, if you know, of having this stuff processed through the septic plant?
Well, my understanding is this leachate was actually tested back in 2006. Now, of course, it might change somewhat, but it's the same leachate from the same landfill. And it was tested in 2006 and found to be acceptable for processing through our plants. They have currently provided all the statistical and scientific information about the current land leachate, and it is being reviewed by Scott Blair now to see its availability. But of course, I can't tell you what else might qualify to be injected into the ground in this deep injection well that we don't know anything about, of course. But the leachate, it appears, could be treated at our landfill, at our septic plant.
Okay, and is this sort of like Bay Harbor, where it's a pass-through to the wastewater treatment plant? Or this is treatment. This would actually be the treatment?
Yes.
Okay.
In 2006, the only problem was price.
Right. Okay, well, I would say we'd probably do it for pretty cheap if we can get it. It would resolve the issue.
Well, in 2006, we really thought that was a good option, and we like the idea of using that because it's an ongoing source of funding. It will always be there, and so it's a regular source of revenue.
Do we know how many gallons we're talking about?
I can't recall, Commissioner.
Back then, I think it was around 20,000 gallons a day.
A day. Commissioner Max Bauer.
I just have a quick question. Who owns this well? Is this owned by Team Completions LLC, or are they just a company that's applying for this on behalf of the owner?
They're like a management company, or permitting,
It's owned by property owners, and I'm not going to disclose their name, but they lease that facility out to this trucking company who wants to apply for the permit. It's owned by people that have lived there almost all their lives. They don't live there in that area anymore.
But they didn't put the well in.
That's correct.
It was somebody else's well.
Yeah, I think I know whose it was.
Well, see, that intersection right there is known as Cancer Corner.
Cancer Corner.
Cancer Corner, the intersection of M37 and Miller Road, 113, is known as Cancer Corner. There's been 11 deaths within a mile radius there attributed to cancer. And it's startling because Dean lives not too much further south of there, and they've not had the problems there. For people that weren't in this community years ago, the Williamsburg blowouts. You know, you get all these experts, and like Dick was saying, they drill a well, they got 1,000-gallon flow a minute, you know. Well, the Williamsburg blowouts, that was never supposed to happen. It was all regulated, DNR, DEQ drilling, but somehow this gas got between the formations. They had huge sinkholes just appear. People would turn on their water in their kitchen sink, and they had really, I mean, you could smell the gas coming out.
It's in the 70s.
Yeah, oh yeah, in the 70s, and it took a long time to get over that, and I still don't know what the pollution would be as a result of that, but all I know is, like leachate from a landfill, you know, you can test it, but you would have to test it, I think, on a daily basis, because how do you know what's in the landfill? And I think it was the Record Eagle said that leachate was the rain and snow melt from the garbage put in the thing. Well, that's not a true statement. Leachate is produced by those materials that are in there making this water and through the rotting process. And, you know, who knows what anyone is dumping in that landfill. For example, you got some prescription drugs in there in a large quantity, you got some arsenic in there, you got anything. But just stop and think about it. You certainly wouldn't take a drink of water off a rotting garbage pile that you had on your own property.
No.
And why would we inject that into a well where we have the wherewithal and the knowledge, and we have a plant that's capable of handling that? And I understand there'll have to be some modifications made, but that's the safe way for generations to come. And that's what the septic plan is about anyway, keeping our water clean.
Dennis?
Well, I was going to give my personal opinion, not my professional opinion, and Commissioner Fleece just said it. You know, I mean, we've invested $33 million in a wastewater treatment plant, the city did, in the townships. Now we've invested another $8 or $9 million in a septic plant, all for the purpose of keeping the environment as clean as we possibly could. And the idea of having facilities like that and then using having people put this into the ground just really doesn't make a lot of sense.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, ready to vote? All right, all in favor of the motion?
Sorry,
More discussion?
I have another question for you.
Okay.
Were you suggesting that the cancer at those corners were caused from the existing well?
Well, you know, I grew up about 8 miles from there, 7, 8 miles. And so I'm really familiar. That was called a bunch of different corners over the years, but the one that was there the longest, I will say, was the Hansons that I remember. They're the ones that built the store and so forth.
Not good.
But there wasn't any illness in that area. That is excellent farm ground right there. It's primarily, that's what it's been used for years. And I don't know, it's common knowledge, and like when I have conversations with people, they say, well, so-and-so's got cancer and died, you know. And these are all people I know. And, you know, why are they getting cancer? Who knows? Now, this well, this brine well sitting there, I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not. But prior to that, years ago, that wasn't known as Cancer. When I say Cancer Corners, I'm talking in the last what would you say, Dean, probably 10 to 12, 15 years, all of a sudden, people are getting cancer. And what's the reason?
Because I'm just reading here that currently that well's used for brine, which is what we put on dirt roads.
Well,
too.
that's what we think they put in it.
Yeah, how do you know?
We don't know.
Who's watching? You know, and I'll give you another example. I own some property just west of Kingsley, right on 113, and I don't own the mineral rights. I've got 1 acre of minerals out of 75 acres, but they were drilling a well years ago, and the dike broke back by my woods. I got about 40 acres of woods there. And it really concerned me because this slush, if you will, you know, and I don't know what was in that dike, right at the base of the rig, ran down a hill into my woods. And I thought, geez, I got to do something about this because I don't have any idea what's in there. So I called the DNR, and or the DEQ, they became known as.
Tanner.
And they came out and they looked it all over, and he checked it all over, and he said, won't hurt a thing. Well, that's 20 years ago.
Nothing's good.
Yeah, it killed, when it went down, it killed the trees. Everything's still dead there. The trees never did regrow. And for not hurting anything, you know, really made me wonder who's watching what. You know, you have a little gasoline spill or something, and oh my goodness, you know. But this was a gray muck-type mud that just literally ran down into the woods, and it's still a dead area in that woods.
But so I am reading the current, what they dispose of is brine in that disposal well from the sheet that you gave me this morning.
Yeah,
That's what we put on the dirt roads too, right?
Right.
Okay.
But I think this must be a different,
No, this is wastewater from an oil and gas drilling process. It's not, I mean, brine is just, you know, a salty water. I mean, this is obviously a special, I mean, who knows what kind of impurities, you know, come out of that whole drilling process.
Commissioner Thomas, did you have a question?
Of course, the other thing is, once they put it into the ground, next year, the county might be buying it to put on the road. Because that's what they're doing on the road. I was going to mention that there are other places, and I'm not going to mention the place now, but one of the neighbors of an area where they dispose of juice has discovered, by going around and checking around this area, there's a higher incidence of cancer there. And I'm not going to mention where it is because I don't want to get sued, but this is not something that's rare. It happens more than we think it does. And this is an area where they've been putting stuff on the ground for years, and they have a higher incidence around that than away from it.
Commissioner Frank.
I don't have a problem with us bringing forward what the Planning Commission passed and concurring with the Planning Commission, but I don't have the scientific or engineering background here or presented to me or in advance of to make any of those conclusions. And I think we should be cautious of, you know, what we're making our opinions based on. Are they on scientific and engineering background? Do we have all of the information? Or are we, you know, going off general perception? I would say, you know what? Why don't we take a position on the biomass plant? There's a whole host of other things. So I would like to see us looking for the. I would like to see us look at the Planning Commission recommendation.
Commissioner Thomas.
I guess the biggest reason I can think of that we should pass this is because there's a lot of people down there that would like us to go on their side, and it just happens to be our residents.
you know, there was a guy at the Mayfield Town Board meeting, lives just kitty corner from the Hannah Church to the northwest, 500 feet. His name is Pooch McManus, but his real name's Lyle. But Lyle, for years, he's a native, but he left and raised his family down in the Battle Creek area. And he spoke at that meeting, and Lyle had a lot of kids. I want to say at least 10 children. And they started and he spoke to the Mayfield Board about injection wells. He says, I went to many meetings. We were assured by the experts there was no danger. He says, let me tell you about the polluted water that's down there today. And he says, I'm glad I was able to get out of there and most of my children, but you know, I had to leave 3 of them because they died of cancer. And you want to talk to an individual that's lived through it, and like he said, the experts assured us. You don't know, just like that DEQ officer that came out there. I would have presumed he would have known what he was talking about, but he didn't, obviously. And somebody here earlier said, how do you know what they're putting down that hole? Even as a Class 2, how do you know what they're putting? You don't. You know, has the state got the money to run around testing every truckload? And they haul truckload after truckload after truckload in there. All winter long they even haul it. And I don't think it's anything that any of us would want in our backyard, period.
I agree. Okay, are we ready for a vote? Sure. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
All right, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Fleece?
Yes.
Hooper?
Yes.
Friend?
No.
Stepka?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Yes.
Thomas? Max Bauer?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes. All right, passes 7-1. Moving on to second public comment. Hearing none. Commissioner committee reports. Anybody want to bring anything up this time? Mr.
Just a
Max
quick
Bauer.
question for the board. The Commission on Aging Board always looks at whether or not the county board would like to have an annual meeting with the Commission on Aging Board. And I was asked to come and ask commissioners if they want to do it again this year, or if, in lieu of our millage campaign and and the work we have ahead of us, if perhaps we could either look at the fall or next year for a joint meeting. It's certainly up to this board.
Whatever, to me, whatever they'd like to do is fine.
All right.
If they have other time pressing needs, that's fine.
All right.
Sounds like fun for other people.
Okay. That answers my question.
Commissioner Fleece.
We've talked a lot about the Weber 4-8 well, but tonight's the meeting, starts at 6, Hannah Church, and if any commissioner can come down there, I think if for nothing else other than to watch what goes on in these meetings, and I think it'll be really informative. Plus, I think we need to support our different portions of our communities too, so if any of you guys can make it, they'd certainly appreciate it down in that area.
Any other comments? Moving on, we have notices and announcements. Anything there?
I noticed we don't have any announcements.
All right. Okay, we have on our agenda a request from staff on the agenda to go into closed session to discuss labor negotiations with district court.
And it should say District Court Teamsters.
District Court Teamsters, so we need a motion.
I would move that we go to closed session to negotiate with District Court Teamsters.
Moved by Commissioner Hooper.
Support.
Supported by Commissioner Thomas. We want a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Hooper?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Stepka?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Sure.
Max Bauer?
Yes.
Fleece?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes. Okay, for the viewing public, we will be going into another adjacent room and then returning and then adjourning.
There were people in it, so
Back
I
conference
Take
room.
a short time out for commercials.
Yeah, that back one.
You know, that's what we do. We start selling commercials. You know, I noticed on TV, they've got these commercials about the brakes. Security, and all that. They've got 3 different guys.
Watch that budgeting for outcomes.
Okay, Commissioner Richardson.
I move we come out of closed session.
Support.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Now we need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Thomas, supported by Richardson to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, passes. All right, thank you, everyone.
Anybody who's staying to watch budgeting for outcomes?
Dennis, can we take